Seats. We're going to be starting our next panel. And we realize there's so much to talk about. We're giving you all these great ideas. But if you could come sit down. So this next panel is going to be about the community college baccalaureate degrees. So I'd like you to go back to the very beginning of the day and think about Francisco Castillo, the student that I met a couple of years ago, and his experience of starting out in a design program that was at the certificate level and trying to make his way to a bachelor's degree in engineering. So we heard about just now some of the incredible degrees that if he'd been lucky enough to live in the Central Valley, he potentially could have participated in. But what we're going to be doing today is giving you some perspectives from academics and practitioners. So I'm still hearing a lot of chatter, so let's go back to our way of calling order. If you can hear me, clap once. If you can hear me, clap twice. If you can hear me, clap 14 times. All right, come on up for our panel.
Thank you. Give it up for our panel, you guys. I know it's after coffee break and lunch.
Yeah.
Hola, buenas tardes. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Dr. Laura Lara Brady, and I'm a senior project manager at the Post-Secondary Pathways and Career Mobility Group at WestEd. And this conversation is particularly exciting for us as we're in the process of creating a Center for Economic Mobility at WestEd. So talk about great timing. And today, I'm excited to introduce you to a phenomenal panel joining us. And with me, we have Professor DeClos, Professor of Biological Sciences and Biotechnology at Solano Community College. Also from the community college side, we have Dr. Tina Recalde, Dean of Health Science and Public Service from San Diego Mesa College. And last but definitely not least, we have Dr. Cecilia Rios Aguilar, Associate Dean for Equity and Inclusion and Professor of Education at UCLA.
Thank you.
Now, I'm excited to jump on the discussion questions because we know that adults with a bachelor's degree and more and are more likely to be employed than adults with a high school diploma, certificate, or associate's degree. And on the other side, we also know that the California Community College system is the largest system of higher education in the nation. Specifically, you know, here the heaviness with it in California with 116 community colleges. And the Community College Baccalaureate degree program is poised to and has the potential to make it easier and more affordable for students to get their BAs, while also having the ability to expand employment opportunities for students. And keeping in mind the remarks from Chancellor Oakley this morning of the opportunity to meet the immense capacity and the demand challenge for providing bachelor's degree for our students. Talk about leveraging the engine for social mobility, right? And to be honest, I'm a researcher by training and at heart, so I'd like to start with some data to provide some context for folks. I came across a recent study that presented the outcomes and opportunities of California Community College baccalaureate programs. And I read that for students that enroll in that program at community colleges, their enrollment and graduation numbers were pretty strong, especially compared to non-bachelor's degree programs. And if I remember correctly, they had a 67% graduation rate in over 2 years, and that's amazing. In addition, the number of students enrolling in these programs seem pretty diverse, both in terms of race, ethnicity, and age. Now, a question I have for the panel is, and Dr. Rios Aguilar, I'd love to start with you. What role can community college baccalaureate programs play in addressing equity gaps for disproportionately impacted and underemployed students? And what does that look like at your institution or with your research?
Thank you for the question. And first of all, thank you for the invitation. It's an honor to be here with you. I particularly want to thank Sonia for putting this together. It's definitely, I agree with her. She mentioned earlier that the baccalaureate programs are one of those very important tools our state has, and I will say also our country has, to center racial equity in the production of baccalaureate degrees. The data you mentioned, we're about to publish in policy briefs through the Wheelhouse Center for Community College Leadership and Research. I promised them they're going to be there very soon, so I'm going to take that marketing moment. But really, the center stage of these programs are you, are my colleagues. They run them. I just partner with them. I got their data, and by which I should say we, me and my research team, and have been working together for the last 2-3 years. I study the occupational and educational journeys of underrepresented, underserved students, so this was a natural trajectory for me as a researcher to partner with them. But it is their data. They are the ones doing this terrific job. Yes, we have the numbers, and the numbers show us that the baccalaureate degrees are reaching out to students who have not been served by our system, right? Older students, like we said, diversity in terms of race and ethnicity, gender, not so much diversity. So what I say to you is that there's a lot of room for these programs to do better. But we have to embrace them, and we have to better support them, and I hope that's why we're here, and part of the reason is that students are finishing. They're enrolling, and they're finishing, and they're getting jobs, and we see from the data, again, that they have collected, without no support and without no infrastructure, they collected significant data for students that are telling us that they're getting those jobs, that there's a line with their program, and that they see the wage increases. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Cecilia. You talked a little bit about the opportunity component, and I want to hone that a little bit more for all panelists. From the student perspective, what is the biggest value of the California Community College Baccalaureate program as it relates to good jobs? What's the biggest drawback or challenge from their perspective, and how might these challenges vary based on student demographics, backgrounds, or identities?
I'll start. So I'm a teacher. So I taught a lab yesterday, and I gave a lecture this morning, and 6 o'clock tonight I'll give another lecture. And each data point that I send is a face, a name. I know their families. They send me pictures. I'm going to be late for class. This is my daughter at her first ballet lesson. And that's what we're talking about. We're talking about elevation. And to me, this is equity work. What my students have shown is many of them said, I wouldn't have gotten a bachelor's degree without this program. And the data shows that 50% of the people that have completed said, I would not have earned a bachelor's degree without a community college bachelor's program. We had 100% graduation, 100% placement rate. We continue to have 100% placement rate in biomanufacturing. Let me tell you what that is. Biotechnology is taking living cells and genetically engineering them right now to make medicines, but in the future to make a variety of products. Across the street from us is Genentech Vacaville, the largest biomanufacturing center of its type in the world. That one building makes more money per year than Disneyland or Disney World or the NFL, or the entire dairy industry in California. I could go on all day. It makes a lot of money. Wow. But we started 25 years ago with a biotech certificate and associate's degree, but because we teach biotech, and there are 30 colleges in California that teach biotech, we teach biotech classes. They weren't transferring. They weren't transferring to UC or weren't transferring to CSU because if they had such classes, which many of them don't, they were upper division. And so they were losing those units. And what we did is by grabbing the bachelor's degree, us and our partner college, Miracosta in northern San Diego County, by grabbing it, we could build a program that was seamless with their associate's degree. And what that's done, there's been a lot of talk today about pathways. It's created a pathway. We have outreach to high school with articulated high school programs. They can jump over prerequisites, certificate, add general education to associate's degree seamlessly into the bachelor's degree. And we've negotiated with 6 different graduate schools to accept our students. So we have an education program, an education pathway, high school through PhD, alpha to omega, with multiple on-ramps and off-ramps. So that's what it's done for us.
Wow, that's impressive. I wonder what the other panelists might want to take that.
Yeah, I'll just follow up and I'll say one of the things for community college baccalaureates, for a lot of students, it is the ticket to a high-wage job. A lot of these students are place-bound with the jobs that they have, with their family. They can't afford to move their entire family and they won't have employment when they get there. So being able to stay within their community and pursue a community college baccalaureate while working provides them with a great opportunity, and that's one of the reasons that we're getting the disproportionately impacted students. And that's one of the reasons they have such a high success rate. They are so motivated because they know there is a job that they're specifically aiming for at the end of that degree, and this is their ticket there. So it's just a great opportunity for them. And when we compare community college baccalaureates to our counterparts, they're inexpensive. At most of our colleges, they're getting the entire bachelor's degree, 4 years of education, for about $10,500. Where else can you do that? So for people with limited resources, this is huge, and it is just such a great value.
Thank you.
I just want to add, if I may, that throughout my research, I talked to a lot of students, and I'm so glad Jim just centers them, because that's what we're here for. Right? We talk about equity. Let's make them at the center of our discussions and our decision making. They are telling us that they need these opportunities. They have this sense of urgency. Their families depend on them. Their communities depend on them. They want to pursue these degrees. Now, what I think is the challenge is that, and I keep hearing today about good jobs and pathways and STEM. A lot of students don't even know what STEM means. What I find in my research is two themes. People want to help others. Well, people say in healthcare, help them see what helping others look like. Of course, nursing is the typical thing we want, or education, but there's so many ways we could help others in different disciplines, in different fields. That's what our students need us to do for them. So I hope we can really take seriously. They also want to fight injustices. Somebody mentioned to us here, how are you going to make sure we reach out to those communities? It is time for us to get the resources to these institutions, do a big going to those communities. Now, I'm not going to say a marketing campaign. Flyers are not going to get us anywhere. It's about rolling our sleeves to go to these places and helping these communities see the value in these programs. People are doubting tremendously about the value of higher education. We've got to make them asset-based propositions. Let's use what you know and who you are and your skills that you have already acquired, and let's make them better. And that's what these colleges are providing to our students.
And my line is, recruiting is sales, it's not marketing. Yeah.
Oh, I like that. I want to hang on to some of those nuggets you guys share, dig a little deeper, especially with the asset-based proposition, as well as the impact in terms of dollars and the transferring that you mentioned, all the way to a PhD. That's phenomenal. How do baccalaureate degrees relate to economic and workforce needs in labor local markets? And what further information could help with that alignment? And this is open to any and all of you.
Let me jump in. So in Solano County, and if you picture where we are, we're the North San Francisco Bay. Our neighboring county is Napa, so you've heard of them. Our other neighbor is Yolo, and you've heard of UC Davis. So UC Davis is 10 miles from us. We are in the North San Francisco Bay, and again, we attracted Genentech, the largest biomanufacturing facility in the world, and what we've done is we're trying to parlay that into attracting more biotech companies, and we've had some recent success. We founded, that is our County Economic Development Corporation, and I was at their annual breakfast on Friday. We're working with them in order to try to market our county to attract additional biotech companies. So we founded the California Biomanufacturing Center there. It's a marketing effort. We'll be at the Bio Conference, the International Biotechnology Conference in San Diego, trying to attract more companies. We were there in Philadelphia the last time it met in person, and so we are integral to economic development. If you think of California and think of our competition with other states, we are not going to out-cheap North Carolina in real estate. We are not going to compete with anyone in terms of cost of living. What makes California, California is talent. It's higher education. It's the ability of a company to move in and to know that they're going to have a trained workforce to step in and hit the ground running in their facility. They're going to have to do minimal training, and that is our marketing strategy for virtually every county in the state of California, and that is how we interact with economic development. Workforce development is related to economic development. It is the strength of California, perhaps the only strength of California.
I want to just add that, you asked about the labor market results and the connection to the workforce and local economies. I will tell you that for me it's pretty difficult to understand that unfortunately our state has not invested in the data infrastructure and has not given us access to labor market data for these programs. These colleges have collected their own data. They have been asking students for these are all self-reported data, what we were sharing before, by the way. We don't have official labor market and wage data for these graduates. We're way behind in California. Washington, the state of Washington and Florida are miles ahead of us. And for me, it is very sad that we can't really measure and provide you with more evidence, with more data, that we can sit down together and examine and really look at how are we meeting the local economies? What else? What more strategies are needed? What other programs, avenues, how they talk to each other? We don't have that investment yet. I'm hoping that since AB 927 passed, that we can provide that. I know the governor is investing in cradle-to-career data systems that eventually will get us there in terms of data, but in the absence of that, we need investments in data, in talking to employers, in understanding how those relationships and that integration is happening with other sectors, with fields, with companies. So my invitation to all of us here is that we work together to create learning communities, to really push that the state collaborates with us in providing us this critical data as we move forward.
And I would just say, if you're looking at starting a program now that AB 927 passed, and that you have 2 opportunities per year to apply to offer a community college baccalaureate, start talking to your centers of excellence, start getting their reports, start talking to industry within the area, find out what are the shortages that they have and how can we meet them. And start those conversations as early as possible, not only to design your application, but to design the curriculum. Because with these degrees, it is so important that we're teaching the knowledge and skills specifically for the positions that are open, and we're meeting those workforce and employment needs. So start talking to them. Centers of Excellence, I already saw some representatives here today. They are your best friends at gathering this data and having a place to start the conversation.
I really wanted to say this because all day long we've been talking about pilots, but the California baccalaureate degree was a pilot with 15 colleges. We're no longer a pilot.
So it could be applicable that this was not death by pilot, right?
It wasn't death by pilot. We are indefinite and expanding.
Expanding. It is life by pilot.
I'm working with 4 colleges to replicate the program that we and MiraCosta have at their colleges. This is a field with 100% placement, and it has to be spread across the state.
I was trying to name the brief, thinking of how do we call the policy brief, and I came to the idea from pilot to permanent.
Oh, nice.
Oh,
I like
it a lot.
Stay tuned for that brief, everybody. It's about to drop.
I had to change the title to a boring academic title, but that was something.
I want to go back to the asset-based proposition that was mentioned earlier. And Dr. Tina, I'm wondering how might colleges design degrees to optimize their value for students in the context of the regional labor market? And what advice do you have for getting a program approved?
So the biggest thing for getting a program approved is really having that labor market data to show that there's a need specifically for that baccalaureate within your region. Going through the consultation process with CSUs and UCs to make sure that you're not duplicating a program that already exists at those facilities. And I would say that there have been situations where maybe there's a little overlap, but if your students are place-bound and they can't get to the university because it's so far from where you're located, that there are avenues for those conversations. So that is huge. And as you're designing your curriculum, things to think about: follow all the industry recommendations. Get those people at the table as quickly as possible. Get as many representatives as you can from different size companies so that you have different pieces of input to think about as you design the curriculum. Almost all of our programs, we contextualize all of the classes specifically for the job that people are training for. And even when it comes to the upper division general education classes that these students take, we contextualize those classes as well. So if they're taking an upper division English class, it's how do you write documents relevant to that industry so that you can be successful within that industry. And so we take all of those skills and we build them into our programs. Another thing to think about, is there a work-based learning component to the program? Do they do an internship as part of the program? Clinical placement, whatever it is that's appropriate, so that they can get some of those hands-on skills, put their knowledge and skills to use and get feedback. And a lot of times those placements actually lead to employment at that facility. So they're getting job offers before they even graduate from the programs. And someone mentioned in one of the earlier panels, those 21st century skills used to be called soft skills. I'm hearing professional skills now is like the new terminology, so whatever you want to call it. The ability to collaborate, communicate, be adaptable, be flexible, all of those different skills, because as the job changes over time, then the workers can change over time to the new positions. So it's so critical to build those skills into the degree pathway.
Let me add, it's not only curriculum that it's important to involve industry, but also equipment. These technical degrees are very equipment heavy. And so we have resources that our brethren at CSU and UC do not. Most of these colleges fall under career technical education, and therefore we have access to strong workforce monies. We have access to Perkins, and let's celebrate the community college system of California. We have an option that CSU and UC do not. We can pass a local bond. So for example, to start our program, it was coincident with the passage of $1/3 billion bond. Our partner college in Miracosta County, in North San Diego County, Miracosta College in North San Diego County, they passed a $500 million bond. We took that and we built a $34 million biotech training facility that is second to none in the United States, a college or university. And so we have that power in our system. Funding is not the problem, it's innovation that's the challenge.
Thank you. And jumping on the funding piece, you mentioned strong workforce program and Perkins, and I love to add student equity as well as guided pathways funds to that. But Professor Jim, I'd love to ask you a little bit about your experience and ask you, where have you seen some great examples of this work across the state, particularly in connecting this work with guided pathways?
Absolutely. So again, guided pathways, this is a guided pathway. This is an education pathway, again, high school, certificate, associate's, bachelor's degree, graduate school. Now, the biotech faculty across the state is all connected. We meet every Friday, and thank you, Vice Chancellor, we are funded by you. So we have this consortium, and that's true of many, many disciplines where I don't know the other faculty that teach biology across the state, but I know all of the faculty in the United States who teach biotechnology at a community or technical college. I was just in Houston, and there were faculty there from New England, from Texas, from Florida, some from California, and we get together to exchange curriculum ideas And that was especially important during the pandemic. What are you doing for virtual labs, or what are you doing? And so I think a pathway is essential, and the pathway has to be well-defined, and it has to have multiple entry and exit points depending on what's happening to that student in their life. And what I've always liked about this field of biotechnology is that education pathway, no matter where they exit, leads to a career pathway where they can move up, move up, move up. Put this together, and it is the American dream. Equity, Solano County, our county, in the last census was designated the most diverse county in California. We contain within our service area, Vallejo, the most diverse city in the United States. Now, what we cannot do collectively is assume that the diversity of our community means that our programs necessarily will be diverse. And what that means is outreach. It means sales, not marketing, sales. You have to talk to families, you have to talk to the students, you have to talk to the parents, you have to talk to the teachers, you have to talk to the guidance counselors, all across the board. So pathways. You need a pathway, and you plug the student in wherever they are in their life experience.
Thank you. Dr. Cecilia, I'm wondering if I could pick your brain a little bit on that. And I don't know if that's sharing too much on the research brief that's about to drop. But I'm going to ask you the same question. Where have you seen some great examples of this work happening across the state? Where would you focus? Where would you narrow down?
I think there's definitely examples that people are, I mean, the 15 colleges, the programs are each, what we would like to do next is document internally what they're doing. West LA, which is the other brief that we are presenting, we've been talking to them, documenting how they got the program to approve, the pillars that are needed, which are not necessarily referring to guided pathways, but the pillars are the culture of the college, how faculty are collaborating with each other, how willing they are, what the teams that need to be put together so people come from different parts of the colleges to talk. The leadership, the vision, the strategy, right, of the leaders to guide through the process to getting the connections ready to the workforce, bringing the workforce, bringing those employers to the conversation to collect that data. Quality, that's something we ought to pay a closer attention to, quality of the programs. In the case of West LA, which is a dental hygiene program, there's so many accreditation boards, and they're bringing all of them together. They're saying, let's sit down, let's look at their government. They have to go through so many accreditation processes. The quality is already there. So the programs, the rest of the programs, that's why I'm insisting on a learning community. How can we create the same quality components for each of the quality measurements, assessments, so we continuously assess and question, is it working for whom, under what conditions, right? So I think that's one important thing that we're documenting in this brief, the institutional experience. Every context is different. They're all situated in very different local economies, but we can still learn from each other. What are they doing that I can benefit from? As they're doing right now, sharing with us what process they went through, what we need to do is systematically collect this information. And again, I'm going to go back to that asset-based proposition. My proposition to all of you is collect systematic data on the working labor histories of your students. So you can borrow from those skills. So we send the message to students, you don't come here empty-handed and in need of remediation or I don't know what, right? You're not deficient. You come already with so many skills. Let's connect them now. Let them see these other skills that Tina mentioned that are needed and how that pathway that they're going to enter will resort into opportunities.
Thank you. I love the student center and strength-based approach that you all provide. Dr. Tina, this next question is for you. We know that increasingly students are returning to school to reskill. So what considerations should colleges keep in mind if they want to be sure the rollout of the new baccalaureate program are used proactively to reach disproportionately impacted and underemployed people? And this goes back to a question we had earlier in the previous panel.
Yeah, I think there's a number of components that we consider here. I think one of the biggest things to think about, we already talked about curriculum designing for industry, all those types of components. But now think about who the students are that are coming into these programs. They're typically older students. They have entered the workforce. They have a family. When we were starting our program, our faculty were really adamant that it's going to be the typical Monday through Friday, day program. But I'm like, don't these people work? How are they going to get here if they're working? They're like, oh no, we talked to the employers, it's all good. I'm like, all right. So we get our applicants, and the applicant pool is so small. I was like, what the heck happened? So I started calling the employers, and they're like, well, we're not going to let them off work. And I'm like, well, no kidding, right? So that's where we went back to the faculty, and we started having conversations. So our entire last 2 years is a hybrid evening program. The students come to campus twice per week. They have about 2 to 3 hours on campus per class. The rest is online. So they do their work independently, but they're brought into class for the discussions, right? Building those 21st century skills, talking through some of the more difficult content and the application of the material. They take 2 classes at a time, so they go 8 weeks, next 8 weeks, next semester. And so they chug out 4 classes per semester, and they actually really like that evening hybrid model. So think about scheduling with the students in mind and what the students actually need. Think about the student support services that you're going to give. One of the nice things about starting a program out a little bit smaller, we have a program director who is a faculty advisor who gets to know every single student. He was saying he knows their families, right? So talk to them, find out what their life challenges are. Connect them with counseling, connect them with financial aid. Why weren't you here last night? Oh, your car broke down? You know what? We have an emergency fund through Student Services that can provide you with support. So those wraparound support services that you can give to students to help them be successful and support them through their journey. Jim also mentioned being flexible, right? They have to work late. They have deadlines on the job. We don't want them to drop out of the baccalaureate because other things are happening. So be flexible with them, work with them. When it comes to marketing or outreach for your program, go to where the people are. So we have a certificate of achievement, we have an associate degree, and then we have the baccalaureate degree. We send out all of our information to everyone who's completed the certificate of achievement, to everyone who's completed the associate degree. So every year we remind the alumni of their opportunity to come back and complete the baccalaureate, because we realize once they complete one level, this might not be the right time for them, right? Let them go work, earn some money, now come back for the next level. We also work with our high schools in the area that have large percentages of students from disproportionately impacted groups, and we start working with their guidance counselors and educating their families of the opportunity that we have at the community college. And it's actually funny because we've got some students from that, but we got parents from that, because they're like, oh, this is a great opportunity for me. Why am I not doing this? So it's really amazing when you are very attuned and having conversations with your students and what you can do to support them and really help this be successful for them and get them into the workforce and supporting their families and moving on in their lives.
MiraCosta has a full-time liaison that does exactly that. What's going on? Why weren't you there today? And that has dramatically increased their success rate. I've had multiple parent-child.
Yes.
Usually they don't go in the same lab team, so they'll be in opposite sides of the room. That's pretty universal that they don't do that.
Yeah, our first cohort, we had an aunt and the niece that both came into the program and completed and went through the entire program together. And what's really neat is we've had students who've come through and said, I never thought I would complete a baccalaureate, and they're sharing with us that they've been accepted to a master's program once they've completed. So, I mean, it's just a great journey, pathways.
I think there's a whole group of students out there that if you say, get a baccalaureate, first they say, $60,000, that's a bazillion jillion. I mean, the sticker shock of merely the tuition at UC is disqualifying for many of my students. The second is, it doesn't seem practical. On the other hand, if you do connect it like we do, this equals career. And again, when my students call me and they say, I got a job, I said, I'd like to correct you. You didn't get a job, you initiated a career. If you connect that, it seems to me that we will reach a lot of students. I think there's a whole cadre of students there that said, I'm not going to take chemistry. That is this esoteric, equals job. Oh, okay. You know, so stuff like that.
I also want to, I'm glad they're giving you the nuts and bolts of running the programs and the actual details of how you do this on the ground. I take sometimes more of a macro approach, trying to help move the state in this direction. I will also want to say and invite the state to really reconsider the support system to help, to really strengthen their work. And one thing that we are going to publish soon in the reports, and one of the recommendations is we need to alter the student-centered funding formula. We need to consider the pay for faculty, for those of you teaching in these programs. We cannot continue to perpetuate the inequities that the system has built for centuries, decades, however you want to call it, wherever you want to measure it, right? The UC system, which I work for and I'm part of, consistently gets the bigger pie, gets more funding. We gotta stop that trend. We gotta really advocate for the people serving local communities and for centering equity and racial equity in that. The community colleges serve the most underserved students in our system. So again, we need to revise how we're funding these programs. How are we going to create systems of support and connection so they thrive, so they can keep doing this excellent work that they have been doing over the past years? It's not longer, I think the practices are great, but again, I'm trying to think of processes, systems that we need to put in place so that these programs are no longer existing, but they thrive. And if they thrive, our communities of color are going to thrive. Our first generation students are going to thrive. A lot of older students are going to thrive. And I hope we start changing the perception that there's these linear paths to higher education, right? Only thinking very like high school to, right? No, we got to think broadly. We got to think like Tina is saying, we go to college. It's not one person going to college. It's we go to college. It's, again, changing those asset-based propositions that you and your team, bring them with you, and somewhere in the community college sector, those family members and your team member are going to be accepted because there's so many programs, so many options. And along the way, maybe they get a certificate, and they're going to come back. We need to embrace movement at the state level as well, not just locally be flexible, but also at the state level. Create the systems and the structures so people can move around and come back 2 years later and get that baccalaureate degree and then go back to work and get a career.
Yeah. On-ramp and off-ramp.
I feel like I could just drop the mic and be
Exactly.
done. I don't know if we should continue this. But as folks are getting ready their questions for the panel, I want to go back to a couple of points that you pointed out, and I really appreciate you highlighting the inequities in terms of pay and looking at the macro level, right? The California community college system serves the majority of students in the state, yet their support system is skeletal. Like there's only 80 people supporting the largest national higher education system, right? So that's just shocking. But I really, I want to go back to what Dr. Tina and Professor Jim mentioned in terms of meeting students' needs and leveraging student supports as a way of leveraging retention and making that a retention strategy. And one of the things that I've seen across the state and community colleges is the recent focus on retention versus recruitment, because one is cheaper, faster, and everybody has a role in it, right? So as folks are getting ready their questions for the panel, I want to ask this to all of you. How do you see bachelor's degree program expanding with AB 927? You mentioned that earlier. We have a community college baccalaureate program across a range of disciplines like automotive technology, biomanufacturing, and dental technology. What are some other sectors where we might see new programs developed? And how are colleges carving out that unique workforce needs that they can address that are aligned with the specific needs of the local community? It's open to
I'll start
anyone.
there. There's a desperate need for a clinical laboratory technologist, and that requires a bachelor's degree. And there's a desperate need for that. The other thing, nursing. Yes. So this was designed for nursing, and because of politics, it wasn't. Nursing wasn't included. But really, if you think of the nursing programs at your college, it's 2 years of prerequisites. Then it's 2 years added on top of those 2 years. That's a 4-year degree. They take the same test that the BSNs take out of CSU. That has to change. And we didn't broach it because of politics. We wanted AB 927 passed. But really, for the good of the state, we really need to do that. Well, it's politics, right? So you need to lobby your representative. And it's going to be bare knuckle politics. You think Washington is brutal, this will be brutal, but it'll be worth it.
And I think when it goes back to that too, it's also looking at, and I think we need to really hear what Cecilia is saying about needing to be flexible within the state. People are fighting for their piece of the pie. They don't want the duplication. But when you look at the shortage of nurses and you look at the hospital requirements for having a certain percentage of BSN nurses on staff, if they can't meet that requirement, that's a problem. And is that more important? Or is it more important that a certain sector of education gets to have the degree? And so I think it's bringing people to the table and having those conversations and what's really best for the state of California and the healthcare system. And so it's continuing those conversations and being bold and getting the right people at the table and reaching out to the people to have those conversations. But I think in terms of other sectors, there are so many opportunities, and that's why it's really looking at, in San Diego Imperial County's region, we have our centers of excellence puts out reports are what were the pandemic resilient jobs? What are the jobs over the next 10 years that are going to have the major shortages that we could be focusing on trying to fill? So looking at those reports, finding out where a baccalaureate is appropriate, then meeting with the industry. Can your college create that degree or program? Just doing the research and being knowledgeable, but I think we have to start changing. We have that opportunity now with AB 927. The next round will be open, right, for applications, so start your work now, because it's not something you can do overnight. You have to put the research in and the time, and you have to have all the data. So start now and really start talking to your colleagues on your campuses, but then your local workforce development boards and your industry partners to see what opportunities there are within your region.
Let me say one thing that came up today that I'd like to reinforce. A lot has been said about this generation coming up, but what I've found to be true is they really do want to change the world and not merely pick up a paycheck. They really do want to do good for the public. And in these fields, automation, health sciences, they really can help their community and do good. And let me talk about, again, my field of biotechnology. The next stage, I'm glad other people quote Wayne Gretzky and skate to the puck. I overuse that quote, but thinking ahead, we're working on a project with cell therapy that is a cure for cancer. It's taking immune cells, genetically engineering them, putting them into a patient that is slated for certain death within that month. The immune cells, the genetically immune cells go around and they destroy the cancer cells and they're tumor-free. From certain death to tumor-free, gene therapy, taking genes and putting them into children that have a genetic disorder, correcting that genetic disorder. In this field with stem cells, it really will be the deaf will hear, the blind will see, the disabled will walk. You will alleviate human suffering, and that's what we need to sell for this generation. At the same time, you can have a career with upward mobility. And if you'll indulge me, let me tell you my story on why I'm such an advocate for biotech. When my son was 4, he woke up one morning and we took him to an emergency room and he had this rash. The rash was diffuse capillary coagulation. Every single clotting factor in his body went off. If you think of the deepest bruise you've ever had, he was that way over 100% of his body, and his fingers and toes were turning necrotic black. And they have a saying, DIC, it means something different in the emergency room. Death is coming. I called my father-in-law. He's a pediatrician. He retired after 40 years. He said, Jim, I'm telling you, you're going to read about a survival rate here. There's no survival rate. He hung up with me. He called the family, and he said, I'm going up for the funeral. I'll call you when it's over. Then they came up to me, and they said, we'd like to try something. It's an off-label use. We need your informed consent. We'd like to try a thrombolytic. I said, a thrombolytic, you have to give them tissue plasminogen activator, which is an enzyme that digests blood clots. You have to give them TPA. And he said, do you know TPA? TPA is a Genentech product. I worked on TPA. There's no drug in the world I know better than TPA. I have my students make TPA, give them TPA. And they said, oh, okay. And so they inject this enzyme, and it went around and it digested all the blood clots and saved him from certain death. He would have been dead that day. So this is what we're talking about. We are talking about changing the world with these fields that the bachelor's degree address, changing the world in multiple ways, at the same time giving an opportunity for students that currently have, or at least they think they don't have any opportunity, and pushing them into an educational pathway that goes into a career pathway, and that is the American dream.
That's great to hear about your son, Jim. And I'm wondering maybe you should drop the mic after this one. I mean, I don't know if we could top that, but thank you for sharing that. I'm wondering if the audience has any questions for our amazing panelists before they leave the stage. Oh, we have some questions.
Somebody who has not asked a question yet? Just a second. Okay, Nora?
Just very quickly, you're talking about biotech and the way in which we traditionally hear about it, but we in the Central Valley are very ag-centric, and this is an area I think that we could explore and expand that would have phenomenal impact, and Delta has a fabulous program in relation to both materials and biology. Have you entered into the ag world? Thank you.
Absolutely. So that will be the next phase of biotech. Currently, biotech means making medicines. There was a report last week that biotech will be a $4 to $30 trillion industry within 10 years, and we'll need 1.1 million more people in the United States. The next phase of biotech is not making medicines, but making commodity chemicals, chemicals that are currently extracted from petrochemicals. That will be done in the Central Valley, because there you have to put the plants near the feedstock, near the carbon source, near where you're getting the carbon. That's Central Valley. We have to democratize biotech, and you're right. By the way, I spent part of my youth in Tulare, so I'm a Central Valley guy too. So.
Any other questions?
So, Tina, I think it was you that touched on avenues around duplication, because this really is about equity work, and we have so many people that are place-bound. And I'm speaking from a place where Cerro Coastal Community College is the largest service area in the state of California. And the Sierra Nevada separates us from the rest of the state. And so there really isn't this commuter population that's heading over to the CSUs or UCs over the mountain range, and when it's open. So I just wanted to see if you had some insights into those. You said there's avenues to pursue, and so do you have some particular direction on that, or if there is a conversation that's taking place that I can also jump in on?
Yes, that's a great point. So the legislation is written that there is a consultation process with the CSU and UC to avoid duplication. But there are conversations in certain areas where you do have place-bound students who would never leave to go to CSU or UC, that there have been instances where in that consultation process, they agree to sign off on your specific college offering that baccalaureate because you're not in competition with them and those students would not have any other opportunities. And I think the biggest point when you start to have those conversations is to bring up that equity component and the place-bound nature of your student. And one of the biggest things that's powerful about these community college baccalaureates, what we're actually finding in the data is these students stay in California and they typically stay within their community. So being able to go to those briefs and reports and share that data, and this is why we're arguing to be able to have this flexibility. And if you can have that consultation process first and have the sign off from the CSU or UC that potentially duplicates the degree as part of your application packet, then it will make the consultation process that the chancellor's office has to do a little bit easier because you already have documentation of that being completed. But I would say it still has to meet a workforce need in your area. It can't just be a baccalaureate.
Any final questions? All right, so we are going to take another brief break, about 10 minutes, and then we're going to have our final panel, which is going to be looking at how you can work with your regional consortia to get this work going in your area. So come back about 5 minutes after the hour. Thank you.